How hard do you expect it will be for him to rein that chaos in this evening? How easily could he be slipped up tonight?
So you bring up a great point. I think he is going to rein it in. I think Biden is going to have more energy than people think. I think Trump is going to have a little more professionalism, if you will. See, if he gets frustrated by Biden, who is effectively the old man, it's past his bedtime. If that guy is getting under your skin, then it's going to show a real weakness. Now, I think he's going to get a little frustrated and a little blustery with the moderators. I think if there's any attack, I think it's going to be with the moderators because, will they shut his mic off? I think he would actually like it if they shut his mic off a couple times, so he can kind of play that victim. Oh, they wouldn't let me speak. They wouldn't let me have my say. So I think that. If he shows chaos with Biden as opposed to just trying to stay above him, I think that's a weakness for him, if anything. And then, of course, as they get into the issues, as opposed to the traditional reality TV stuff, Trump is going to have to come with specifics. You can't just say inflation's bad. It is. It's awful. It's crushing families. But you got to come with solutions. People want change, so you got to show the change you're going to bring them, whether it's a better opportunity with energy costs, a more of a free market in healthcare costs, quantitative tightening. I don't know. He's got to come with something, getting rid of all the folks at the Fed. He's got to come with something that says, on day one, I'm doing this to make your costs, your availability of funds to actually pay the rent and bring, put food on the table. This is what I can do for you. And if he can do that, then people see him as that change agent, and he can be successful in November.
Well, that's why we like talking to you, Governor, because we tend to get to issues beyond the politics that's fun for everybody to deal with here. That was a nice table setter. Let's talk about issues. We'll start with the economy. And I suspect that we might hear the word tariff tonight. The president's been talking about, I should say the former president, Donald Trump in this case, making permanent the 2017 tax cuts, but also an across-the-board tariff that would help to pay for them. We talked about that today with Andy Blocker, Invesco's head of U.S. government affairs on Bloomberg Radio, about the inflationary impact of that very proposal. Here's what he had to say.
Tariffs are inflationary. So 60% with China will be inflationary. The 10% across the board for every country will be inflationary. To the extent that it becomes more real, that we believe 60% would actually be implemented, that would have a major impact on the market, especially in the early days.
They're both going to talk about their plans to bring down prices. Governor, does Donald Trump make himself vulnerable to attack by Joe Biden with this tariff idea?
Potentially. And again, he has to remember, both candidates have to remember, they're not talking to Wall Street insiders. They're not talking to Congress. Right. They're just talking to average Americans, and they're going to have a very large audience. So even if you get to the word tariff, you got to explain what this stuff means. And people just want to know, am I going to sleep at night because I don't have as high credit card bills, and you're going to help me bring prices down and under control? And how does that actually work? So there's got to be a little bit of a simplification, because these can be very complicated economic issues. So if he can do that, and he's always had a pretty good connection with people, a pretty good ability to kind of explain those types of things. If he stays lofty, he's in trouble. If he can bring it down to a real level and show that it won't be inflationary if they try to attack him on that, because if he can't show that, then he's in trouble, and he probably shouldn't bring it up, because the economic issue is all about the high costs of living. Even the word inflation, everyone knows what inflation is, of course, but even that is a lofty word, right? He's got to take this opportunity to literally talk to the American people, right? Make that connection that he did in 2016. He lost in 2020, but if he gets down just a very real level and kind of works through those issues, what immigration means to their family, what he's going to do on inflation for their family, how he's going to get a free market back into healthcare costs, which are a huge part of the inflationary problem right now. If he can talk at that real level, he's going to make some progress.
Well, Governor, we know that the tax code isn't necessarily the simplest thing to explain to anyone, yet I would imagine we will hear something from taxes on him, specifically on the notion of extending the tax cuts that were passed during his administration in 2017. The Committee for a Responsible Federal Budget suggests that would add $4 trillion or more to the deficit. If it is so additive to the deficit, is that a policy worth pursuing, worth arguing for on that stage tonight?
If you can show that you're reining spending in, absolutely, right? If we continue on this massive spending trend, which both sides of the aisle in Congress have just been awful about, then we're going to have a problem. But if he can show that he's a manager, he's going to rein in spending. He's asked, Joe Biden asked America to stop spending as much money because they don't have as much, because inflationary costs are killing them. So Donald Trump has the opportunity to say, and government's going to become more efficient. We're going to get rid of the wasteful spending, and that's how we can control some of this stuff. That's how you offset offset that. But to your point, it's a very good point. You want to talk about tax cuts, you got to go in and spending. I think the other thing he could do, I don't know if he will, is just the simplification of the tax code. Everybody believes the tax code is massively complicated. No one can understand it. And simplifying it is a winning message to a lot of voters out there that thinks that, and Trump talked about this very bluntly, how the rich get to game the system. And if you can talk about reining that back in and really working with Congress to get that finally passed, a simplification, that's another connection he can make with the average voter.
One of these days, we're going to get it on a postcard, Governor. When you were supporting Nikki Haley, we talked about the potential contrast that she could draw, just the optical contrast, if not a policy one, sharing a debate stage with Donald Trump, or with Joe Biden, rather. Now it's Donald Trump. And I look at a full-page ad that the Biden campaign is taking out in USA Today. It reads, "The choice, a convicted criminal who's looking out for himself, or a president who's fighting for you." Joe Biden's trying to make the contrast. How would you answer to that?
Well, Joe Biden's the one on the hot seat, right? If Joe Biden shouldn't have to make a contrast, he should be running on a record of success. He can't convince people that he hasn't been president for the last 3 years. So when you look at the international chaos that's happening, all Trump has to do is stand back and say, there weren't massive wars and all this international chaos when I was president. It's a simple argument to make, right? He doesn't even have to go into that much detail. He can say he had a clear plan on immigration. That's a top issue for a lot of folks, right? He can just talk about the unfairness of what's happening with this arbitrary debt forgiveness. Nobody likes that idea. That's a political disaster. I don't know what the heck they were thinking. Nobody thinks that's fair or right. It's not helping Biden politically at all. So just talking about a fairness. He needs to come in not as a disruption in the debate, but show himself as a disruptor into Washington and be, like I keep using that word, change agent, right? That's what people want to know. You're going to change the culture, you're going to change the approach. Biden should be running on a record of success, but he can't do it, right? He's almost like trying to act like, the last 3 years of chaos, wasn't under his presidency. And that's a tough argument to make.